Today I'm reading from Grimm's Fairy Tales. This is my copy from childhood. The publication date is 1954, so yay, something that's actually older than I am. And today I'm going to be starting with Rumpelstiltskin, because what I've noticed is a number of people have been watching my reading of Rumpelstiltskin by James Finn Garner. That's from his politically correct bedtime stories. His books are published in 1995. Definitely a different version than what I'm going to be reading today. Hey, Rumpelstiltskin. And I don't have pictures, but you can see the print is nice and big because, hey, it was a kid's book and I read it as a kid. Rumpelstiltskin. There was once a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter, and one day, having to go to speak with the king, he said, in order to make himself appear of consequence, that he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold. The king was very fond of gold, and he said to the miller, "That is an art which would please me very well. If your daughter is so very clever, bring her to the castle in the morning, and I'll see what she can do." As soon as she arrived, the king led her into a chamber which was full of straw, and giving her a wheel and a reel, he said, "Now set yourself to work, and if you have not spun this straw into gold by an early hour tomorrow, you must die." With these words, he locked up the room and left the girl alone. There she sat for a long time, thinking how to save her life, for she understood nothing of the art whereby straw might be spun into gold, and her grief became greater and greater, till at last she began to weep. All at once the door opened, and in stepped a little man, who said, "Good evening, fair maiden. Why do you weep so?" "Ah," she replied, "I must spin the straw into gold, and I'm sure I don't know how." The little man asked, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" "My necklace," said the miller's daughter. The dwarf took it, placed himself in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the bobbin was full. Then he set up another, and whir, 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 thrice round again, and a second bobbin was full. And so he went on all night long, until all the straw was spun, and the bobbins were full of gold. At sunrise the king came, very much astonished to see the gold, but although the sight gladdened him, it only made his heart more greedy. No shocker there. He had the miller's daughter led into another room still larger, full of straw, and then he bade her spin it into gold during the night if she valued her life. The girl was again quite at a loss what to do, but while she cried, the door opened suddenly as before, and the dwarf appeared and asked her what she'd give him in return for his help. "The ring off my finger," she replied. The little man took the ring and began to spin it once, and by morning all the straw was changed to glistening gold. The king was rejoiced above measure at the sight of this, but still he was not satisfied. Leading the girl into another still larger room full of straw, he said, "This you must spin during the night, and if you succeed, you shall be my bride." Seriously, the rooms are bigger, but the time to do the work doesn't increase. "For," thought he to himself, "a richer wife thou canst not have in all the world." When the maiden was left alone, the dwarf again appeared and asked for the 3rd time, "What will you give me to do this for you?" "I have nothing left that I can give you," sighed the miller's daughter. "Then promise me your firstborn child if you become queen." The miller's daughter thought, "Who can tell if that will ever happen?" And not knowing how else to help herself out of her trouble, she promised the dwarf what he desired, and he immediately set about and finished the spinning. When morning came and the king found all he wished for, he celebrated his wedding and the miller's spare daughter became queen. Okay, to be fair, he didn't marry her because he loved her, and okay, I get she didn't want to be killed, but doesn't sound like, husband material. About a year after the marriage, when she had ceased to think about the little dwarf, she brought a fine child into the world. Suddenly, soon after its birth, the very man appeared and demanded what she had promised. The frightened queen offered him all the riches of the kingdom if he would leave the child. But the dwarf answered, "No, something human is dearer to me than all the wealth of the world." The queen began to weep and groan so much that the dwarf pitied her and said, "I will give you 3 days. If in that time you discover my name, you shall keep your child." All night long the queen racked her brains and for the name she could think of, and sent a messenger through the country far and wide to collect new names. The following morning came the dwarf, and she began with Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar, and all the odd names she knew. But at each the little man exclaimed, "That's not my name." The second day the queen inquired of all her people for uncommon and curious names, and called the dwarf Ribs of Beef, Sheepshank, and Laceleg. But at each he said, "That's not my name." The third day the messenger came back and said, "I've not found a single new name. But as I came to a high mountain near the edge of the forest, where foxes and hares say good night to each other, I saw there a little house, and before the door a fire was burning, and round this fire a very curious little man was dancing on one leg and shouting, 'Today I stew, and then I'll bake. Tomorrow I shall the queen's child take.' Ah, how famous it is that nobody knows that my name is Rumpelstiltskin." When the queen heard this, she was very glad, for now she knew the name. Soon after came the dwarf and asked, "Now, my lady queen, what is my name?" First she said, "Are you Conrad?" "No." "Are you Hal?" "No." I'm laughing. Somehow the name Hal is stuck with 2001: Space Odyssey. "Are you Rumpelstiltskin?" "A witch has told you! A witch has told you!" shrieked the little man, and in his rage stamped his right foot on the ground so hard he could not draw it out again. Then he took hold of his left leg with both his hands and pulled away so hard that his right hand came off in the struggle, and he hopped away, howling terribly. From that day to this, the queen has heard no more of her troublesome visitor. Rumpelstiltskin, of course, is also the main character in Once Upon a Time, if you have watched that. That was a series I also enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below, which is your favorite version of Rumpelstiltskin? Is it the Grimm version? Or did you enjoy James Finn Garner's take on it? Next week's fairy tale will be a reading from Politically Correct Holiday Stories. I've already read Rudolph the Nasally Empowered Reindeer, and next week we will be reading A Christmas Carol. Definitely a classic. I enjoy watching the black and white movie. We have that on, I think, DVD. I'm looking forward to watching it again, and having read through this book previously, this version of Ebenezer is definitely not the one you'll remember. Hope you can join me next week, and until next time, take good care.